Hello everyone, I'm back with another problem. In this video tutorial, I'm going to solve the second problem of the 75-day study plan. The problem name is find the pivot index, and that falls in the easy category of the Leetcode, and the acceptance rate is 52.0%. Now let's start. Let's move on to the question. Okay, now let's move on to the question statement. You are given an array of integer nums. Calculate the pivot index of this array. And now let's see how the pivot index is defined. The pivot index is the index where the sum of all numbers strictly to the left of the index is equal to the sum of all the numbers strictly to the right of the index. We need to focus on one thing, that pivot index is not either in the left sum or on the right sum. That's the catch in this question. We need to see that by reading the definition of pivot index. If the index is on the left edge of the array, then the left sum is 0 because there are no elements to the left. This also implies to the right edge of the array. So the right sum would be equal to 0 if we are in at the if the pivot index is the last index, then the sum of all the n minus 2 elements would be equal to 0, and there is nothing to the right of the n minus 1 element, so that sum would also be equal to 0. So now we have to return the leftmost pivot index. We need to focus on this, the leftmost. There can be a rightmost pivot index also, but we need to return the leftmost pivot index. If no such index exists, we need to return -1. Now let's move on to the example and its explanation of the answer, how we came to the conclusion. So we are given a nums 1, 7, 3, 6, 5, 6. The output is 3. That means the pivot index is this index, the index containing 6. So now let's see the left sum and the right sum. So the left sum is 1 plus 7 plus 3, that's 11. And the right sum is 5 plus 6, that's also 11. The leftmost pivot index is 3. Now let's move on to the another example. Example 2, 1, 2, 3. So we can easily see that there doesn't exist a leftmost pivot index because the left sum and the right sum are not equal for any index. Now let's move on to the another question. Another example, 2, 1, minus 1. So 2, for the first index, the left sum is 0 and the right sum is also 0. So that index itself is the pivot index. So now let's move on to the coding it up. Let me first explain you the approach I would be using. So for each element, I will be calculating the left sum and the right sum, and then equating them. If they are equal, then we will return that index, or if we are out of the loop, we will return -1 as directed by the question. So let's see the coding part of it, and there is a catch in how we are gonna calculate the left sum and the right sum. We are not directly gonna calculate the left sum and the right sum for each element. Rather, we are gonna use a trick. I will explain that trick as well. So let's take an element named sum equal to 0. Let's initialize it with 0. Then a left sum, the sum of the elements left to the current index is equal to also 0. And then right sum, uh, which stores the value of the elements, sum of all the elements to the right of the index, that's also 0. So first of all, I will calculate the total. Let me first code it up and how the pieces join up. I will explain you that also. So first of all, I will calculate the sum of the whole array. And let's initialize the size of the nums as well. N equals to nums dot size for int I equals to 0, I is less than n, I plus plus, and then we are just gonna add it up. Add the element to the num, add the element to the sum, plus equals nums I. Now this loop is just you. This loop was just used to calculate the sum of the whole array. And now this is the main loop which I'm gonna write now. So for int I equals to 0, I is less than n and I plus plus, and then I'm gonna first subtract the current I element to calculate the left sum, minus equal. I'm gonna first subtract the current element from the sorry, let me correct myself. I'm first gonna subtract this the current element to calculate the right sum of the current index. So let's store it in the right sum, and for the first index the left sum would be 0, so that doesn't matter, we have to update it later on. So if left sum is equal to right sum, then we are gonna return the current index I. And now we need to add that element to the left sum for the next iteration. Left sum plus equals nums I. And now we are gonna return a -1 if we haven't got an index for which the left sum is equal to the right sum. And now let me submit the code and see if it is correct. So I have made a typing error, nums. I use num instead of nums. So it's accepted by the Leetcode, and this is the, I guess, the most appropriate and most intuitive solution. And I'm also gonna summarize it for you. So first of all, we need to take a temporary array sum to calculate the sum of the whole array, and we need to store store the left sum in a variable called left sum, and the right sum in a variable called right sum. And then we need also to it's your choice to store if you want to store the size of the array or not. It's totally your choice. I'm storing it in n. You can just use nums or size again and again, but it would increase the time complexity. This has increased the space complexity, and so uh, it's just a trade of space and time. You can see if whether you want to use or not. So first of all, by the first loop, I'm calculating the loop calculates the sum of array, and the second loop checks whether the left sum is equal to or not equal to the right sum. So first we have calculated the right sum by subtracting the current element from the sum. The right sum is equal to the sum, the right sum basically. And if the left sum is already for the first index, it will be already 0, and we will be adding the current element afterwards after comparing. The left sum is equal is if the left sum is equal to the right sum, we return an I, and then update the left sum, add current element to it, and if we haven't got an index for which the left sum is equal to the right sum, we return a -1. Thanks for watching.